Hello, all. As we start, I want to name that I'm joining today from the traditional grounds of the Lenape people, New York City, Lenapehoking. And today we gather in a time of heartache, a time when empire has turned violent, and the price is the lives of innocent people, good people, showing up to protect what is sacred. Other humans, neighbors, strangers. We gather during a major snowstorm and also at a moment that is a threshold moment. We are approaching the midpoint between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. As we start today, let us take some names. Let us name Alex Preddy. Let us name Renee Good. These are our recent ancestors who gave their lives to protect what was sacred for them, for us. It has been a time of fires, conflagrations stoked by the empire, and many fires, small and large, around the country, around the world in response. So today, let us contemplate together which fires are ours to tend, and where we can offer support to those tending other fires. I am going to go to gallery view myself, so I'm not just seeing my big face. What a beautiful song to start with. Okay, so as we said, and welcome those who were not there at the very opening. Here we are again, speaking about small fires, living pathways. So as we said in the opening, our world is on fire. I call it a conflagration. It's burning down lives built over years, decades, sometimes generations. The empire's reach seems to be limitless. And if I'm being honest, I don't come to you with feeling very ministerial in this moment. I am hurting. Last night, I could not fall asleep. I kept on watching those videos of Alex Preddy, different angles, different bystander videos, and trying to make sense, trying to feel into how do we call this a democracy? And yesterday was definitely one of the worst moments in the recent past, but it's really been like this for a while now. And there are moments when I have felt like this leaden weight falling on me. It's like there's no air to breathe. And fire, fire cannot burn without air. It'll just go away and you get into this depression, this depressed mode. So I, of course, didn't know that we were going to talk in the midst of a snowstorm and right after this brutal killing in Minnesota. But here we are. But the image that I wanted to share with you, I think still applies. And it's an image that came to me a couple months ago in another moment of absolute lack of hope. And again, it was a night and I was tossing and turning, couldn't fall asleep. And I had this image that was so alive that immediately knew that this was not mine to keep. This was mine to share. It was not meant for me alone. And the image was this, is actually a series of images. So first the image was that this is a dark night. It's dark, there's this huge landscape, there's no light. And then I felt a fire flickering. And I realized it was a campfire. And I felt the warmth, the invitation of the campfire. There were people around the campfire. And that first warmth that you feel when you step into the lighted area of a campfire. And then I looked out into the vista, imagining that I would see nothing. But instead, what I started noticing were other campfires far away, other campfires. And then it was almost like a video game where there were these little pathways that lit up like you would have in a video game between the campfires, crisscrossing. And suddenly I had this net of campfires connected by these lighted paths. It's like Indra's net. And I breathed out, and only then I realized that I had been holding my breath. Like, I'm not alone. We are not alone. There are other fires. And that's the message that has lived with me for these past few months, and it has morphed and grown and changed. But the essential image is still alive. So I wanted to share this image with you, and I want to share it with you at this moment, which is, as I said, it's the season of Imbolc. Imbolc is on 1st of February, which is the Celtic Gaelic festival. That's that celebration that's between the winter equinox and the winter solstice and the spring equinox, the midpoint of that. And the goddess who is venerated on Imbolc is Brigid in Ireland. And so I was reading about Brigid, and I found this story that really touched me very, very deeply. And the story is actually, I think it really applies to our image of this tending fires. So Brigid is there. She's called Brigid of Perpetual Flame. And it is believed that in one of her original temples and now abbey, the priestess, there were 19 priestesses and later on 19 nuns who were meant to keep her fire always burning. So there was a fire that always burned in this place called Kildare. And how it worked was that these 19 nuns were each responsible for a day and a night of tending the fire. So the first priestess would tend the fire for the entire night, the rest of the day, and at dusk, she would hand over the responsibility to the second priestess, and so on and so forth. And then one of the really amazing things that the story told me when I read about it, was that the 20th night, so the 19 priestesses took their turns. On the 20th night, no one tended the fire. So as dusk fell on the 19th night, the priestess would put a pile of wood next to the fire and say, Brigid, guard your fire. This is your night. And when they came back the next morning, the wood was burnt, the fire was alive. So it's a story that tells me that if we each tend what is ours to tend, then Brigid will tend the fire. We are not alone in this. It's not just little human egos trying to do something. It's a bigger calling. And then there's also these stories, just like any of these stories, there were invaders, there were powerful institutional forces that wanted to removed that flame. And the priestesses and later on the nuns would always find a way to hide a coal or an ember. And when the invaders left, they would relight the fire. So some people say that these fire has been burning for hundreds of years, others say thousands of years. There's even a story, and I love this story. It may be just a story, but what a story. One of the stories says that one time when the invaders came, and there were many of them, and they were checking all over the place, one of the nuns hid an ember in her rosary bead. Let's let that image sink in. An ember hidden in plain sight within her rosary bead, so she could light the fire again. And then, of course, in the 16th century, it was King Henry VIII who finally had the power to kill that fire. And for over 400 years, there was darkness. And then as recently as 1993, a group of Brigidine nuns gathered in the town square of Kildare and said, we will relight this fire. And the fire has been lit since then. And you can go visit it. That's the fugitive work. That is fugitive hope. That is emergent hope. These nuns hiding the coal, hiding the ember, and making sure that there is a fire, no matter what the empire has to say. And this brings me to another theme that's also been very much in my heart and mind for myself and for those that I work with, students, whoever else comes in my path, is that this feeling that the problems are so big, so large, that my little fire has very little meaning. What am I going to do? I'm going to touch 10 people, 100 people? How is that going to change anything? And I get into that myself. So I'm not saying it from a place where I'm beyond it, but I'm saying it from the midst of that sense of failure when it feels like all my effort go to nothing. So that's why Minnesota has been such an interesting teaching for us. Because people have really shown us what can happen when we tend small things. Blocking one street, surrounding one van, blowing whistles in one block. Or for those who didn't show up in the protests, delivering groceries to families who are too afraid to come out, to give them rides so they can go to work, the kids can go to school. These are small fires, not valiant by themselves, but together, it's hundreds of thousands of people showing up, tending little fires. And then the fire has spread. It's gone to, there are protests now all over the country, in New York, in LA, and everywhere. There are protests in other countries. There are, yeah, there's just so much that we can talk about. Even the Golden Globe Awards, people had these lapel pins saying, be good and ice out. Tiny, tiny, tiny fires, but they matter. The speech of the Canadian Prime Minister at Davos. Just naming clearly, intelligently, without getting worked up, naming what's going on. That's a fire. And that's the kind of fire that we can actually sustain. You can tend that kind of fire while working, while taking care of children, while taking care of aging parents, while sleeping, eating. Because street protests are wonderful and they really feed us that energy that we need sometimes, but they're unsustainable in the long run. You cannot live on the street and street protests. But we can, each of us can tend the little fire that is ours to tend. So this idea of the campfire comes back to me. So I think of campfire, like what, for this image to work, right? This singular campfire, which is tiny, few people, I know them, I know their faces, I know their stories. If somebody is missing, I know who's missing. That's the quality of a small campfire. But the problem of a small campfire can be that it can become exclusionary, isolationist. It's my campfire and you can't come in. And that's why those pathways are so important. And as I kind of try to imagine these campfires, these interconnected campfires, I start to think about what kind of roles do we need for these campfires to thrive? And I think of the fire tender, the person or persons whose job it is to make sure the fire is burning, to make sure there's enough wood, there's enough air. Sometimes you need to blow into the flame, sometimes you need to put more wood. And if empire comes, how to collapse it all, take the ember and go a mountain over and start a fire again. That's the fire tender's job. But that's only one of the roles. For a campfire to work well, you need threshold keepers, people who will make sure that the fire is safe, that people who are coming in, you want to have people come in, but you want to vet who's coming in so that the fire can continue to burn and it doesn't become a, I don't know, problem. You need somebody that I might imagine as pathfinders, people who kind of are not meant to tend the fire. They're not the hearth keepers. They're the ones who step out and go into that dark night to find connection with another fire. These are people who are bringing something from their fire, a story, a song, a medicine, and offering it when they reach the other fire and bringing something back from there to their own fire. So these are people I call pathfinders. And then you need path tenders. So once a path has been created, someone has to make sure that the path actually remains open when leaves fall, when twigs fall, when snow falls. Somebody has to make sure that the path remains open and navigable. That's another role. So even as we start thinking about these interconnected fires as a metaphor for how we organize, it would be really interesting to kind of really feel into what am I being called in this space of tending campfires? Because each one of us is called to do something else. And there are even, I would claim there are seasons in our life when we are called to do different things. You could be fire tender today, and 20 years from now, you may be the pathfinder because you've taken care of the kids, the family is in place, and now you can go and do things. And then as you become an elder, maybe your job is to, oh, the other function I didn't name, and it's a very important function in any of these campfires, is the medicine person or persons, people who compound what is the original medicine of this fire, and then mixing in what's coming new and making sure that it's relevant to the times, relevant to the person who's in front of them. That's another role. Maybe that's the role of the elder. So those are some of the images that I'm playing with. And in terms of how this might work, actually in 1953, many of you probably remember Ray Bradbury's book, Fahrenheit 451. There's a great image of just this kind of model working where, and if you don't know the story, very briefly, it is that the empire decided that books are problems. So they would burn all books, break down libraries so that nobody could have knowledge. And there came about a group of people, rebels, who would memorize books, one book. So somebody would memorize a novel, another person would memorize a book of poetry, another would memorize a book of recipes, or I don't know, some treatise about something very esoteric. And then they would go out into the forest and find other people. They were called the book people. They would find other people who had memorized other books, and they would gather around campfires, and each would recite what they had memorized. And no empire could take that away because it lived inside that person at that point, that particular book of poetry, that particular story. And that's really another thing about a small campfire that I find very powerful, is when you have one large conflagration, the empire can come in and just dismantle it and you're done. But if you have a million tiny campfires, and not only tiny campfires, but the fire keepers are trained to be also fire protectors, ember keepers, so that if empire comes, they can just gather it up, move elsewhere, start again. That is fugitive, that is subversive, that is the kind of action that no large system can ever shut down. That is what Bayo Akomolafe would call fugitive hope. Something that flies under the radar because it's too small. It's 10 people, 20 people, 100 people. But imagine those kind of campfires, but millions and millions of them around the world. And a whole new possibility starts to emerge. So this is the story that I wanted to share with you today. I'm just going to see if there's any. Yeah, and these campfires, really, one of the qualities of this campfire is the intimacy that builds, because it's a small number of people. We like this community. People know each other. Adrienne Maree Brown, one of my favorite teachers of this time, she talks about relationships that are inch wide and mile deep. We create these inch wide, mile deep relationships that can last even if there is a fire, because that's the level of connection, that's the depth of connection. So as we close this sermon, I just want to remind us that we are all ember keepers. I hope this image blesses and guides you in the time to come, that you can and you are responsible to hold on to these tiny embers. And when you feel your ember is dying, it's flickering, remember there's somebody else who has another ember. And when your fire is nice and hot, you can invite somebody else in. It works both ways. That's the beauty of this model. Remember that you are an ember keeper. The fires are already burning. Pathways are already forming. We're already part of the web. So go forth, ember keeper. Ember keepers of ages past, bless you and guard your path. Thank you. So in closing, I want to offer you a prayer that came across my path. It is a modern interpretation of the seventh fire prophecy of the Anishinaabe tradition. There will come a time after the long darkness, after the broken treaties, after the children taken, after the language silenced, after the land was bled dry, there will rise the seventh fire. And this fire will not be lit by kings, not by churches, not by governments. It will be lit by the people. The prophecy says, when the world is sick, when the rivers are poisoned, when the animals disappear, when the people forget who they are, a new generation will rise. Not perfect, not untouched, but remembering. They will remember their songs. They will remember their languages. They will remember their ceremonies. They will remember their original instructions. And they will be given a choice. The seventh fire people are the ones who choose the living path. They will pick up what was almost lost. They will speak what was almost silenced. They will heal what was meant to die. They are not here to repeat trauma. They are here to end it. They are not here to be victims. They are here to be rememberers. They are the children of survivors, the grandchildren of warriors, the dreams of ancestors who prayed through genocide. The seventh fire will light a new way, not just for the indigenous people, but for all people. Because when indigenous knowledge rises, the earth breathes again. When ceremony returns, balance returns. When the people remember who they are, the world remembers how to live. We're not waiting for the seventh fire. We are the seventh fire. We are the generation that remembers. We are the generation that heals. We are the generation that chooses life. The fire is already burning in our language, in our children, in our prayers, in our resistance, in our love for the land. The ancestors did not survive for nothing. They survived for this moment. They survived for us. And now, as we extinguish the chalice, we remember that the fire continues. In the embers we carry home. In the small fires we tend tomorrow. In the pathways we'll walk between here and there. The flame at Kildare burns still after 1,000 years. Our small flames join that endless vigil. Until we gather again, go in peace, Ember Keepers.